Hey there, everybody out there in twitching. Good Lord, I am probably blowing out some people's eardrums. Let me adjust that real quick. Um, Gary, you need to turn down your setup on your end. Thank you, sir. So thank you. All right, we just didn't want a massive, ridiculous overall echo. We are about to go live with our second edition of Project WWWN live on both Twitch and YouTube. Um, to let folks know what is going on with this, we are going to be streaming some of our Project WWN podcast live to record essentially. That way, we will take this raw stream and edit it in some magical editing software, clean it up, and add some ads in Anchor, and it can be used on Spotify. Uh, please, guys, if you want to hear the raw, clean up, less rambly version of what we are going to be doing, please utilize Spotify because that is where we are generating our revenue. We've recently been approved for ads over there on Spotify through Anchor. We are hoping to eventually be able to expand that. So we hope that you guys will reach out and listen to us at Project WWN on Spotify. With that being said, I am going to roll tape on the intro and get us started with our with Project WWN live. Okay, no, I'm not
This
because
has
that was
been
the
Project
outro, not the intro.
WWWN. Thank you.
Eh, yeah, here we go.
This is Project WWWN, hosted by Isaac Davenport and Gary Hamrick Jr. Project WWWN is an exploration into the character development, world building, and game settings that go into developing the best possible creative superstars for current and future wrestling games.
It appears the
Legends is Project WWWN's trademark interview segment featuring
we think. I don't know. It's showing a black screen for you on the Twitch feed. So I don't know if that's because of the delay or something else.
that's not cause of the delay. That's just I don't know why. Okay, there it pulled up, and there is my lovely voice. And let's check see if we've got Gary Hamrick on the other end.
All
Um,
right. Well, let's hope that we're hearing me.
you're not. I need to add you back in somehow. When you reconnected,
Uh,
changed your it changed your input setting on the VOD.
Mm-hmm.
So give me a sec and grab
Oh, lovely.
that source information and you are officially back. It's back right. Give me a voice, Gary.
Right.
Okay, it's picking you up. It's
Well,
picking
we
you up.
hope.
You there?
I'm talking. Don't worry. I don't know if you can hear me. Okay, fantastic.
I wasn't hearing you.
There is
I
a
can't hear
hell
you
of a
now.
delay going on.
All right, so
There is a hell of a delay going on.
all right, and better
Well,
yet, I can.
yeah,
All right,
yeah. There's a
there's a
hell of a.
delay in the video.
Well, I don't know if everybody else. No, I've got on one monitor. I've got where we're broadcasting. I have what we're doing on the other monitor, and I looked over, and after I was clapping, I looked over like 30 seconds later. It showed the clapping. Because you were talking about you finally got me back, pulled my
Right,
audio pulled back in. All right. Everything
Gary,
will stay connected here.
and now I think that I think that I might have lost
I.
my volume. I think I might have lost my end.
Oh Lord.
Still going.
We did not have this
It's
problem
just the
the other day.
delay on the capture signal. Okay. All right. While we're having this
Okay.
problem
Okay.
now. But anyway, so
All
let's
right.
get
We're gonna have to do
into
some malicious
what we're
editing
going to be
on this.
talking about. So yeah, but there's always some hellacious editing. So, guys,
Oh yeah.
what we're going to be discussing today is our another building legends segment, and let's roll our building legends promo intro, and then we can get into what we're going to be discussing today.
Building Legends is Project WWWN's trademark interview segment featuring guests from the wrestling game creative community. Building Legends dives deep into the character's influences, look, gimmick, movesets, attributes, and personality traits to discuss how all of those ideas work together to create a fully realized and original character.
This now, we are on our building legends segment, and as you can see on the screen, we are going to be talking about Shining Simon Sullivan, one of Isaac Davenport, failed hero 1985's original. We talked about Chloe Corvin last week, and we are going to be focusing on uh, Shining Simon Sullivan.
Well, should I
And
be
this
leading
is
this
going
for
to
you
be,
since
I
you're the one
think,
doing
a
the interview?
fairly interesting listen, especially to people who have created characters long term. And Shining Simon Sullivan, well, let me at least give some context, and then we can switch roles. So, and this could actually lead a little bit of a discussion at the beginning here, Gary, with between you and I. Anybody who's created characters for a long
Okay.
time realizes over time that sometimes what they develop isn't working
Well, not with
for
how bad your audio.
right, okay, or what? Better, somewhat better, not better. What's happening?
A little bit. A little bit. Your audio is stuttering on my end.
I don't know why.
Your audio was okay. Now it's better, but it was stuttering there for a second, and I was only catching like every other word you said.
So what I was saying is that when we have created characters for a long time, every now and then we come across ideas that we almost try to crowbar into a character, right? We
Yep.
we want it to work, and we want to work, and we want to work, and we want to work, but at the end of the day, we sometimes have to realize sometimes that's going to work better for something else. And the creation of Shining Simon Sullivan is a perfect story of how sometimes one character develops into two characters. And so that is what kind of the story that we're going to go through as Gary takes the lead and essentially pulls us through one of our regular Worldwide Wrestling Network building legends segments. So I'll turn that over to Gary. And Gary, if you will, start us off at question number 2 with that
I will.
introduction
Well,
of who the
it's
Shining Simon Coven
yes.
is.
Well, it's less a question and just an introduction to the character.
Right.
Shining Simon Sullivan is the shining light of the Worldwide Wrestling Network. At least that is what is printed on his merchandise. Inspired by the rock and roll personas of Kiss, Poison, and Cinderella, Simon Sullivan, from the silver and gold mesh shirts to the tassels on his gear, is glam in professional wrestling. However, his bad boy attitude unfortunately follows him into the often not letting sportsmanship or tradition with this ring general. Despite his garish makeup and fashion, Shining Simon Sullivan is a respected but not well liked member of the WWWN roster. And I noticed a key person that you left out of that description.
And that's
And I
someone that we're
know,
going to talk about.
yes, I know that's the one we're going to talk about. Um, but I wanted to start off with something else.
Right.
Because you mentioned the idea of um, two characters kind of evolved from the original idea. So
Right.
I want to go back. I want to go back and to the beginning. What was the original idea, and how
Well,
is it
the
differing from what we see in this paragraph, or does it?
the original idea is that there was a lot of pieces of Simon that was originally a part of the Michael Maverick character.
Okay,
Michael Maverick was originally supposed built off of this idea of a bigger Shawn Michaels, okay, a guy who
okay,
was a guy who was a 6'6" Shawn Michaels, and doing a lot of the Shawn Michaels stuff, but with different finishers and signatures.
right, right,
And as the games themselves got a lot more advanced in what you could do and how much you could alter in a character, I slowly
okay,
started to realize that a lot of what I was trying to crowbar into Michael Maverick being this Lothario heartthrob type, it didn't work for what I wanted to do. And I also realized that if I was going to make a character that was going to have some of the moves in its move set that I wanted him to have, it didn't fit with the persona that
right,
of this glam heartbreak kid Buff Bagwell esque thing that I was trying to crowbar into the Maverick character. Um, at the same time, there's another character that hasn't been introduced to the Worldwide Wrestling Network audience overall named Scarab. And Scarab was supposed to be essentially, for lack of a better word, this universe's Sting. The especially that Crow era Sting.
Oh, okay.
Um,
The
and
the the leading into Hogan, let's take forever,
yes,
Sting.
yes,
Yes.
yes. Um, that mysterious Sting where everybody wanted to compare it to the Undertaker when it really was nothing like the Undertaker, but there was so much things that
Right.
people wanted to point out and say but with mind
Well,
games. Well,
okay.
in
I'm
order,
gonna point something out there. To me, the entire reason for the comparison to the Undertaker, and I don't disagree that the comparison was kind of cheesy, but
yes, it
it was
was
you know the Crow character is a goth character,
right,
and we all think the Undertaker is this goth character. No, he's gothic maybe,
right,
but
gothic,
he's
but not
he's
goth.
he's closer to an old western Undertaker mixed with the actual gothic art
Right,
era
and,
than he
as
is what we think of as goth in the late 20th century going into the 21st.
right,
So
as the clothing and fashion aesthetic. And
yes,
so
clothing and fashion aesthetic.
the essentially I realized as I was adding to the personal roster overall that I didn't have who Scarab was before he was Scarab. If I was going to have this this character who was going to make this traumatic turn,
Right.
what was he before the turn?
And
And that's where Shining Simon Sullivan started from.
okay.
Who was Scarab before he became the darker character that was going to eventually be a part of the roster, eventually be a part
Right.
of and here I am saying this, but I haven't made a Scarab character in
And I
almost 4 years. Um, and
and I
that's
don't know that you
because
should. I don't
and
know you honestly
and
should.
and I might eventually, but I
Right.
always and I'll get into some of the differences in the build when we start talking about how does
Right.
he work differently and stuff like that as we go through the questions. But
Right.
that's where the Shining Simon Sullivan character came from, asking
Okay.
those questions in character development that sometimes people are afraid to ask because they get so stuck into this is what I want this character to be, and they don't take a minute and rewrite, or they don't take a minute and go, is this really working? Would this fit for something better? And
Right.
so that's kind of the where that started from.
All right. And the you've done a few things over the years that you and I have been and working together on this on the WWWN stuff. I've seen some changes in the presentation of Simon, mostly for the better. Um,
Yes, I agree.
and um, how much of the current stuff we're seeing, this rock and roll persona that you mentioned, how much of that was originally there, and how much of it was,
Well,
your riff on Shawn Michaels, so to speak?
as I started putting together the original Shining Simon Sullivan character,
Right,
I had three big influences at that time. I wanted to stay with Shawn Michaels. I wanted to get end of his WCW run Macho Man Randy Savage, which I think that his look and his aesthetic at the end of his WCW run is very underrated. Um,
Okay.
and then also Buff
I
Bagwell.
I I think I think a lot more than just his later WCW aesthetic was underrated. If you're
Oh
talking
yeah,
about Savage,
yeah.
I mean,
Um,
I'm not talking about his in-ring work. I'm talking about just the visual
his
presentation
presentation, his
of
presentation. That's what
Savage.
I'm talking about. Yeah.
I think that was
I really loved
overrated.
how
I mean,
he
underrated for much of his career.
yeah, but you see, the thing of it is that when everybody thinks of Macho Man, they think of the loud colors and the popping tassels and the cowboy hat and the feathers and
Yeah,
neon. That's what they think. I love
but if
how
you go back to
Randy I love how Randy updated himself at the end of '99 and 2000, where it
yes,
was still loud and it was still rock and roll and it was still Macho Man, but it was let's tone
even the
this back a
cowboy
little bit.
hat. Yeah, even the cowboy hat and to some extent the tassels that you mentioned, even that was an upgrade. If you go back and look at his presentation going into the Steamboat Savage match,
Right,
it, it was a lot more simplistic than him post winning the title at WrestleMania 5. No, 4.
right,
Winning the WrestleMania 4 match. There was a huge upgrade when they put the
right,
title on him after WrestleMania 4.
right. And then the other influence at the beginning was another guy that I think was a little bit underrated. I know that he's had his ups and downs. I know that he's fairly divisive, and that's Buff Bagwell. But I've always been a Buff for real. I have always been a Buff Bagwell fan. Okay,
And I have
and
never
Buff
held that against you. I
and
have
and
never
and,
held that against you.
and Buff has done some shady stuff and some stupid stuff,
Yes,
both
he
in
has.
wrestling and outside of wrestling.
Yes, he
He's
has.
been in trouble. He's in rehab now. I hope for the best with him. But I was always a fan of Buff Bagwell because as a young wrestling fan, okay, this is before I matured and had gotten more and more involved in watching wrestling.
Right,
Buff Bagwell reminded me Buff Bagwell was the answer to the what if question. What if Shawn Michaels wasn't built like a flyweight? What if Shawn
right.
Michaels had that had that
Was
more muscular physique, okay,
right, right.
that I was
No,
looking
and I
for at the beginning of Michael Maverick. Um,
right.
and so that's why Buff kind of fell into the equation. And so,
No,
um,
I'm not gonna say anything. My only thing on Buff, and this is the difference between me and you as fans, and I guess it is kind of an age thing for us. Of the stuff I was looking for when I was introduced to pro wrestling, I think probably was very different than what you were looking at.
right, right, and
And
what I was seeing, and when I began watching it regularly, because
yes,
my first introduction to wrestling, honestly, was WCW versus NWO World Tour. Okay,
okay,
I knew of wrestling, but I got the video games first. Then the second thing was Coliseum Video with a bunch of different uh, like history of videos.
right, right.
Like one of the
I
things
don't
that I
think I've
watched
ever,
on repeat.
I don't think I've ever watched one of those history of videos.
They did a WrestleMania retrospective. That was my introduction to what WWE was. And when I started
I don't know if that's a
watching
good or bad thing.
WWE, but no, here's the thing. This is it. When I started watching WWE, on and off, because I was always more of a WCW guy. But as I
Right,
was during the Monday Night Wars, as it was, I was going back and forth. I was like, one of these things is not like the other. I've got this history of, and I had no context for time. Okay, they just
right.
had they just went through the different WrestleManias, and I knew that the last matches were the most recent, but I
Yeah.
I went into
You
expecting
watched.
to see I went in expecting to see Goldust in his classic gold and
Oh
silver getup. I
man.
went in expecting to
Ooh.
see Brett and expecting to see
Ugh.
Shawn, and seeing Stone Cold starting out. And
Right.
I started watching WWE Hardcore in 1998, and so it was a
See,
completely different
yeah,
world.
yeah, it definitely was. See, I
And
I started
and
watching at least 10 or 12 years before you did, I think. So, all
but
right. Well, let's let's step away from that for a moment. Um, how would you describe? Because you've touched on this a little bit about Simon's influences. Uh, how would you classify his work style?
um usually I do a pick three style where I try to create a
Yes.
hybrid style based off of um uh the people that I'm pulling from their work slide list.
Right.
Well, in this case, I only have two styles that he's pulling from. He was an most of the guys that I pulled from were all arounders or technical. And so they either had a really high technical skill level or they were classified as all arounders that could do anything. So to match that, I would say that Simon really is classic American professional wrestling, that catch out
Okay.
style, sports entertainment style.
Which makes
And he is
sense.
also he is also a technician.
Okay.
He is a technical wrestler. He is strongly technically sound, but at the same time, he leans into the entertainment more than some of the other characters that I make builds for. He is
Right.
specifically meant to be an egotist
Right.
at heart.
Which definitely is early Shawn Michaels.
Yes.
Um, I mean, especially after the barbershop.
Turn. Yeah.
Yeah, the barbershop turn. So okay, you have we've touched on a few of the initial influences, and I'm sure we're gonna touch on some others. Um, as far as um, what do you call it? I don't know if this would be presentation or just or development. You've got five influences besides yourself. So take
Right.
us through a few of these that you have listed here, because there's one of these names that I'm seeing on the list. It's definitely not like the others.
Right.
So take us
So
down this list.
we talked about the initial was that Shawn Michaels, at least that at the rock and roll attitude, aesthetic, and
Right.
the egotism, that cocky arrogance, was one of the first
Almost Sean
influences.
pre DX. Sean pre
Yes,
DX.
yes, yeah. And
Okay.
then the next influence is Owen Hart. And Owen's influence comes from video games. I played WWF Warzone, WWF Attitude religiously, and
So
when
did
I
I.
wasn't creating my own character, Owen was one of my go-tos because his move set was absolutely awesome. Okay, the
I
spinning
think
heel
Owens was
kick,
one of mine.
the spinning heel kick in that game looked great. Owen looked great throwing it, and nobody else looked right throwing that spinning heel kick.
Right.
And to this day, I go through and I classify spinning heel kicks and running spinning heel kicks, and I try to find the one that looks the most like Owens, and I set it aside, and only certain people wind up with that Owen
Oh
spinning
yeah.
heel kick.
Which
Um, and
I think makes sense.
And the thing of it is that also Owen was one of my. I was a big fan of the mid card in WWF. I was not, like I
Yes.
said in earlier
You
episodes.
and I both were. You and I
Um,
both, I think, gravitated toward the mid card.
right.
Um,
Um,
for various
of
reasons
course, I
that we
got
knew
excited about
WWF.
Austin, but I mentioned in previous podcasts that I was not a huge fan of Austin's presentation,
Right.
especially when you're looking back reflectively over, especially me being from North Carolina, from the South, Austin
Right.
coming off as this drunk, abusive redneck, and
Right. I
it was fun for the time, but in retrospectively, it's just for me, it's just like, oh my god, how did this get over? Like
well,
that's me.
I completely understood how it got over, but I'm definitely. Here's my thing, and this is, like I said, I've been watching wrestling probably about 10, 12 years longer than you. I I was always going for the, cheering for the mid card guys or the tag teams. These days, with the WWF doing shit with their tag division, it's generally been the mid and upper mid card guys, and then the women.
Right,
But I mean, they've managed to put a few people in that upper mid card main event picture that I am legitimately a fan of now.
right.
But I mean, if you look going back, I mean, my um, my favorites back in the day, Piper was a mid card guy who got a main event run,
Right.
and it never,
and
it
then
was,
and then slowly turned himself into a legend
yeah,
without having a main um upper card run,
yes. I mean,
like a
he was
long-standing
a,
one.
yeah, a long standing one. He had the main event spot, and it kind of was almost a one off. And then he
Right,
became, a upper mid card attraction guy after
right.
that. Um,
Well, back to Owen. What I took away from Owen was a lot of his, and a lot of people don't think about this when they think about Owen, but a
yeah,
lot of his high flying, things that he did early in his career. Um, he wasn't a daredevil by any
no,
means, but he did some things that were really innovative. And just seeing some of those simple but tactical high flying things were what really attracted him and was something that I knew I wanted to have in this character. Then there are two that almost seem like they are two sides of the same coin, um, in Rick Rude and Gold Dust.
okay,
Um, Rick Rude's entire gimmick for his entire upper mid card and main event runs in WWF and WCW.
yes,
His whole thing was he was the hyper masculine man's man, and I'm going to call attention to it, and I'm going to call you out for being uh,
right,
less than. Okay. And then, almost in response to that kind of thing that was going on in the late 80s and early 90s, the
well,
Gold Dust gets created.
up until Rick Rude had his career ending injury
Right, but
pretty
I'm
much.
talking
But I mean,
that kind of gimmick being something that
right.
can put somebody into the upper echelon.
No, but I'm
Okay,
saying Rude.
and
But I'm saying if you look at what Rude was doing, when he had the injury that basically ended his in ring run, he was still doing some stuff, as a manager, here and there. I'm thinking of the
right,
ECW appearances
yeah,
that
yeah,
were a different category of his in ring
right.
gimmick.
Right, but it
Um,
was still essentially that same rap, okay, to
Give or
get
take.
heat. And so, but then almost to run contrary and parallel,
Yeah.
okay, Gold Dust gets created, which is a completely WWF original idea that Dustin Rhodes took on and not only made it work, but made it work well. Now, Gold
And
Dust
made
influence
it work in
originally
ways that
for
it never
me,
should have.
right? And but Gold Dust was another one that was one of my mainstay plays because he had a crazy move set compared
Yes.
to other characters in the game. He had the curtain call. He had the Golden Globes. He was another one that had one of those spinning heel kicks built into the game, whether that was a part of his real life move set or not. And
He did it as Gold Dust. He did it as Gold Dust a couple times.
right,
I don't know if it was. I don't think it was his um most frequent move,
right.
so to speak.
But the whole thing is that when I was starting about creating Simon, my idea was so Rick Rude has his gimmick. Rick was a big guy, okay? He was a big guy,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
yeah. Well, what I mean by big is he was a body guy, but he
Yes.
wasn't. But he also wasn't hyper muscular, okay? Like
Well.
compare if
Okay.
you compared him and but you see and this is the
Here's the
difference
difference.
between cosmetic bodybuilding and for look
Right.
versus mass. Okay,
Well, yeah, yeah.
Warrior,
Rude was cut. Rude was
yes,
cut.
right,
Okay. And I think you hit the nail there. He was muscular. He was cut. He looked like he was ready to go off on the bodybuilding stage. But
yes,
I mean, if you want to make the
but
comparison
he
with the
wasn't
Warrior,
massive, right?
he would have been massive in his weight class. I think.
In his
I
weight
mean,
class, he would have
oh
been
yeah,
massive.
yeah, but not
But
next to
compared
somebody like
to
Rude or I mean, if you put Rude next to Warrior, yeah. Um,
and so like my idea is okay, would it be funny or would it be entertaining if you had a guy who was this semi-slight built dude who was just shredded to hell,
yeah,
okay? Like completely shredded, but he is nowhere near like the weight class of a Rick Rude or an Ultimate Warrior. Okay,
right.
basically putting uh, the if you were to a good modern day equivalent would would be, excuse me, a guy like Tony Nese. Okay,
Okay, yeah,
um, and who's basically he's shredded to hell, looks like $1,000,000,
yes,
but he at the same time isn't isn't this tall guy. Okay.
right.
And then the other thing that popped into my head is that what if this guy also was this shredded guy, but he played up this androgynous. I'm not going to answer the question, am I gay? I'm not going to answer the
Right.
question if I'm bisexual. I'm going to be who I am, and you get to fill
Okay.
in the blanks.
Okay.
And
Which is
that's
essentially
where
leading into your last one, I
which
think.
leads to my last influence. And I hate to say it was my the most recent influence because if I had thought about it earlier in
Yeah.
development, it would have been the perfect casting from the beginning. So the last one
Well,
is David Bowie.
and I
And
did I mention it to you before you thought of it or after? That's
no,
the question
no,
I have.
you once I mentioned it, you had the aha moment and then started tossing me all of the different versions of Bowie,
Well,
which I
he
had
was
only which
Here
I
was the
had
thing.
only known a handful.
Here was the thing. You know where I got the idea from?
Where?
Cody Rhodes.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Because
right.
Cody referenced David Bowie right after his death. He referenced him while talking about the Stardust character.
Right,
And
right,
he was teasing like he had wanted to do something David Bowie-esque with the Stardust character, and
right,
that creative wouldn't let him.
right, right. And
I don't
um,
know if that is true. I would love to ask him.
right.
Um,
But
but
then,
yeah,
so Bowie, beyond being a massive musical talent and an actor, a lot of the things that Bowie is most known for is his
personas.
basically changing his persona,
Yeah,
going through, and as he's doing different tours and different albums, almost all of his, especially his early work, are concept albums based on personas. Um,
well,
and
even his not his not the I think it's called the Black Star album, his last one.
his last album,
Yeah, not I'm not even thinking about that one, but I mean that was kind of a concept album, but
right?
not in the way people want to think about.
Not right,
But
right.
if you go back to the Earthling album, even that was a concept album,
Yep, it was.
and
It was.
so was Outside.
Hmm.
I think that was what it was called.
And I think that that is, as an artist, that's kind of what Bowie
Yeah,
thrived in, changing perspective. And
I think that was something that um, I think he was very self-aware of doing.
yes, and
Um,
but at the same time, he was self-aware of it, which is the best way
yes,
to know and be able to phase in and out without having to take yourself too seriously with it. Um, and but
I
thing,
think the fans took it more seriously than he did.
I 100% agree on that.
Yeah,
But uh, but swinging it back around to Gold Dust, one of the things that described Gold Dust in the both the WWF Warzone and WWF Attitude um, uh, games, in the strategy guides, they called Gold Dust a wrestling chameleon. And when I remembered that, and then we started discussing Bowie, I was like, there's my connection. That's it. And so here is this wrestler who is using the glam aesthetic to play mind games, who has this certain build, who is this thin white duke, okay, all right,
so to
this
speak.
guy who's shredded, but at the same time, everybody people might question uh, his preference, his relationships of choice.
Right, right.
And he's a guy that is literally just not going to he's not going to answer that question. The whole
And
point is that it's a question mark. And
yes,
and
and
it's
even
not meant to
people
be
who, well, I was gonna say, and even people who think they know the answer, they might be led on just as much as
right.
anybody else.
And and the thing of it is that, like, it's not meant to be any kind of slight by or any, and I hate to use the term queer baiting, but that's not what it's meant to be, because in real life, okay, the behind the scenes character, the person who's not the wrestling persona, in real life, Simon Sullivan, like the person behind that character, he's straight, but he fell into this